For 30 years, The Undertaker loomed over WWE like the Grim Reaper at a clown convention. Stoic, feared, and not remotely interested in your excuses. While his character was built on mystery, his real-life demeanor was built on discipline, respect, and a general intolerance for the sort of asshats who think farting during someone else's promo is heat. Behind the fog, fire, and a gimmick that should have been dead in 1992 but somehow survived 3 decades, Mark Calloway, the man behind the Dead Man, cultivated a sacred backstage code. You show up, you shut up, you work. And you don't act like a prima donna with your head so far up your own arse that your farts sound like ring announcements. And if you didn't follow that code, well, you joined a very exclusive group of people, wrestlers. The Undertaker actually hated, not storyline rivalries, not WWE creative tension. We're talking shoot heat, real animosity, real arguments, real, if this guy's in the locker room, I might throw a chair at his skull vibes. Over the years, The Undertaker saw hundreds of egos, drug problems, unprofessional disasters, and backstage politics. But only a select few managed to piss him off enough to make the list we're about to dive into. Some were loudmouths, others disrespected the business, and a couple were just so insufferably arrogant that even Satan would have put them in a sharpshooter. So let's crack open the casket of truth and take a grim little walk through the 5 wrestlers. The Undertaker shoot hated, one gravedigger's shovel swing at a time. Let's be clear, Giant Gonzalez was not a wrestler. He was a woolly mammoth in a muscle suit. He looked like Bigfoot had wandered into a costume party and decided to stay for the buffet. But Vince McMahon, never one to resist a circus act, thought an 8-foot-tall man covered in airbrushed fur would be money. Taker disagreed. Strongly. Gonzalez was dangerous, clumsy, and about as coordinated as a tranquilized giraffe. Their match at WrestleMania 9 is regarded as one of the worst of all time. Not just because Gonzalez knocked Taker out cold with a chloroform rag. Yes, that actually happened. But because working with him was like wrestling a sleep paralysis demon with arthritis. After their feud ended, Taker reportedly told Vince to never book him with Gonzalez again, unless the storyline involved putting him down with a tranquilizer dart. Nails was a walking red flag in orange jumpsuit form. He debuted in 1992 with the subtlety of a prison riot, attacking Big Boss Man and wheezing threats like a man whose vocal cords had been mugged. But his real offense came backstage, when he allegedly assaulted Vince McMahon over pay issues. Taker, ever the locker room leader, made it clear that Nails had crossed the line. In the dead man's world, you don't physically attack the boss. You just quietly bury him in shoot interviews 15 years later, like a professional. But Taker's hatred for Nails wasn't just about the Vince incident. Rumors suggest Nails had a chip on his shoulder the size of WrestleMania. He was stiff, paranoid, and one missed payday away from cutting a promo on the vending machine. According to Kevin Nash, even the Clique steered clear of him, and those guys thought backstage etiquette meant locking the bathroom door while snorting. When Nails sued Vince and accused him of sexual assault, WWE's lawyers had a field day. Taker, meanwhile, reportedly said Nails was the only man he ever hoped did try him in the locker room, so he could legally rearrange his teeth. Nails vanished from mainstream wrestling after 1993, doing time in the indies before fading into obscurity. But the stink he left behind lingered like a gas leak in a church. And to this day, if you whisper Nails in Taker's presence, he probably checks his fists for tape. Mr. Kennedy had one of the fastest rises in WWE history, and one of the fastest falls. Why? Because he botched more finishes than a Netflix true crime doc. After dropping Batista dangerously on his shoulder during a tag match, rumors swirled that Taker pulled management aside and said essentially, "Get this guy out before he breaks someone's neck." Kennedy had already ticked off Cena and Orton, but it was Undertaker's cold, unblinking disdain that sealed his fate. Anderson would later admit he had heat with Taker and regrets how things went down. When the guy known for surviving hell in a cell thinks you're unsafe, it's time to call your travel agent. To make matters worse, Kennedy had a confidence problem. Not a lack of it, too much. He was cocky, dismissive of veteran advice, and treated the ring like a trampoline park. Taker, who valued professionalism and safety above all, saw him as a liability. When Kennedy got injured and was rehabbing, many expected him to return to a decent push. But the whispers had reached critical mass. Cena didn't want to work with him. Orton allegedly politicked against him. And Taker? He didn't say much. He didn't have to. One raised eyebrow from the dead man meant more than a locker room speech. The The Survivor Series of 1991 wasn't just historic for The Undertaker's first WWF Championship win, it was also the setting for one of the most bizarre and infamous backstage squabbles in wrestling history. During the match, The Undertaker delivered his signature tombstone piledriver to Hulk Hogan. Hogan, ever the dramatist, claimed his neck was injured on impact. Sounds legitimate until you roll the tape and watch Hogan's head hovering inches above the mat like a UFO sighting. Honestly, the only thing injured was Hogan's pride and possibly his acting credibility, which is saying something when you've starred in Santa with Muscles. The Undertaker, being relatively new to the main event scene, was understandably rattled. He checked on Hogan backstage, who then proceeded to spin a yarn so elaborate it made Tolkien look like a minimalist. Hogan initially claimed the impact had compressed his neck, only to later revise his story to say it was The Undertaker's tight grip that caused the damage. It was like watching someone change their car accident testimony mid-trial because the jury didn't look convinced. This didn't sit well with The Undertaker. As he later put it, the incident made him realize what kind of political animal Hogan really was. Hogan's version of events painted The Undertaker as reckless, potentially jeopardizing his standing in the locker room. It was the wrestling equivalent of someone accusing you of murder with a Nerf gun. To add insult to injury, or rather, to invent injury to add to insult, Hogan used his clout to have the belt returned to him a mere 6 days later. So The Undertaker's first major championship run lasted about as long as a sneeze. Hogan eventually left WWE in 1993 before signing with WCW in 1994, where he spent the next few years brothering people into submission. The Undertaker, ever the professional, never publicly buried Hogan, though, let's be honest, if anyone had the tools and look to literally bury someone, it'd be him. But behind closed doors, he didn't forget. Decades later, he'd refer to the incident in interviews, never outright calling Hogan a liar, but giving the kind of diplomatic shade that said, "I know you're full of it, but I'm not going to break character to say it." In the court of public opinion, especially among those who saw the footage, Hogan's claims didn't hold up. It was a shoot moment in a work world, and The Undertaker learned fast. Sometimes your biggest opponent isn't the guy in the ring. It's the one shaking your hand backstage with crossed fingers. Before 2002, if you said the name Shawn Michaels to The Undertaker, you might have ended up with a boot so far down your throat your dentist would need steel-fingered gloves. In the 1990s, Michaels was everything Taker hated: unreliable, cocky, self-absorbed, and more chemically enhanced than a Tour de France cyclist's piss sample. By 1997, HBK had heat with everyone except the guys in D Generation X, and even they were mostly just too high to notice. The real breaking point came at WrestleMania 14. Taker, standing backstage with fists taped up, was ready to beat the holy piss out of Michaels if he decided to no-show or sandbag Steve Austin, who was set to become the face of the company. Taker even admitted years later that he was sitting at gorilla position, taping his fists, just in case Michaels pulled one of his signature diva fits. He had to be led to the ring by a leash, Bruce Pritchard once said of Michaels' condition that night. There was no love lost. Taker thought Shawn was a disgrace to the business. Shawn thought Taker was a dinosaur who didn't get his brand of high-flying razzmatazz. Taker's response? "You better take that razzmatazz and shove it, boy." To his credit, Michaels turned his life around after a back injury and born-again Christianity, which was great news for Jesus, but probably made catering a lot less fun. Post-2002, they made peace, wrestled 2 of the greatest matches in WrestleMania history, and shared mutual respect. But during the 90s? The Undertaker wouldn't have pissed on Shawn if he was on fire unless he was holding a live mic and a copy of the PWI Top 500. In the dark, often ridiculous world of professional wrestling, The Undertaker stood as a rare constant, a spectral figure wrapped in black leather and deadpan judgment, who actually gave a damn about the business. While most superstars were out politicking, tanning, or pretending to be Canadian for a cheap pop, The Undertaker was the one who enforced a twisted sense of order backstage. He didn't just lace up boots, he laced up reputations, keeping egos in check and punches on target. The shoot rivalries chronicled here weren't scripted blood feuds or made for pay-per-view drama. They were real tensions, moments when the theater of pro wrestling collided with the raw absurdity of human nature in spandex. Whether it was Shawn Michaels' tantrums, Hogan's conspiratorial neck, or Giant Gonzalez's tribute to big-footed incompetence, these men managed to get under the skin of the dead man. And that's not an easy feat, considering he's practically embalmed. But here's the thing. The Undertaker rarely lashed out publicly. He didn't tweet passive-aggressively or demand creative control like a toddler in a tiara. No, he did what true locker room leaders do. He handled it quietly, with taped fists and a soul-piercing glare that said, "One more slip-up, and I'll turn your body into a cautionary tale. His shoot feuds tell us more about the man than any urn or lightning bolt ever could. They show us that behind the myth was someone who cared enough to demand respect, not for himself, but for the sacred and often stupid art of professional wrestling. In the end, The Undertaker's true legacy might not be the streak, the character, or even the endless WrestleMania entrances. It's the way he kept the madhouse running when the inmates kept setting it on fire. And honestly, if that's not worthy of a final gong, what is? Thanks for watching.